What about the fact that everybody should be have equity in the game, so much so that I'm definitely sticking with the Ray Miller Construction Limited company because I get more margin off their jobs and their jobs run so smooth that I've skin in the game and I'm going to give them the best of my lads because I'm getting better margin off them and they've been transparent enough with me to say, by the way, Gavin, uh, you've left 3% on the table. So we've put that 3% back over to you so that you can now raise your invoice 3% higher than what it was because
Yeah.
we know what the numbers are on our side. But equally, by the way, if this goes the wrong way for whatever reason, we want you to share the burden with us to get us out
Yeah.
past the
Sort of a
contract.
rough with the smooth type mentality. Yeah, and it's interesting as well because there's contracts that actually, by their very nature, they actually do that. So if you're looking at the NEC option C, for instance, NEC option C, gain share, pain share type arrangement is that's the order of the day, and it's pretty open book. So it's all there for you for everyone to see, and kind of the beauty of that contract, if it's administrated properly, is that in the gain share type arrangement, you obviously define what that looks like, and as you say, if you win, you both win. Equally, the pain share type arrangement, you can define what gain and pain looks like. So again, that can be also sort of almost liable to misuse potentially, but in its purest form, it's not the worst thing in the world. It depends. I think also you're trying to identify what gain or what pain. I think let's major on the pain side of the bracket. What pain could be legitimately borne by the supply chain if it went horribly wrong? What would actually be fair? Because obviously, who's got deeper pockets comes into play. But I think it's a fair discussion to be having. And equally, the other thing that came to mind as well is I distinctly remember actually when I was working for a main contractor once where subcontractor I was looking at their application for payment, and they did legitimately just leave out an item that they were entitled to, and I'm like, I don't feel right taking this off of them. So I picked up the phone to them. I was like, you got a bit of a howler in your valuation. Just a heads up that you might want to correct that. And the amount of emotional capital that I acquired with that subcontractor through that one bit of honesty paid dividends. Like that was a check that was cashed for years. In that our relationship went to another level, and if I needed to call in a favor, they were there. They were there to help. And so this is actually where you kind of flip the mentality on its head, thinking, man, we're rather than us like taking chunks out of each other, if we were to operate in a more honest manner with one another, actually, probably what you're going to find is people are going to be a lot more conciliatory when another person wants to call in a favor. You've got a natural working relationship and a good one at that, and that's often what I found with a lot of the subbies I was working with. Is like I almost have rinse and repeat with a lot of my subbies on jobs because we just had that working relationship. And it's not to say they excluded others and that they got everything, but you were you were damn sight more likely to be using the subcontractor who you knew was honest and wasn't at it, in their account, and equally, you were the same back in the other direction. They knew that they were getting the same thing, so they were willing to give you a bit of discount at the front end of the job because they knew that they weren't going to get screwed to the wall, 6 months later when they're active on site. So I think you're right in terms of like parity or fairness when it comes to payment. There's many different ways that you can arrive at a conclusion there, or for both parties. But it definitely, I think, is also a salient point. And then,
That
like,
point
sorry,
five
carry on.
that comes into your point five of fair payment.
Yeah, so fair payment is interesting because I think we went through a period of time in the industry where there were some large main contractors that were struggling and they were stretching some long payment terms out, 90 days, 60 days maybe. Even anything above 30 is a bit much for a subcontractor to swallow. And often actually you find sometimes in the industry that main contractors potentially will use that cash flow to to support like an investment arm of the business. And so I think probably what we will hopefully get away from is that using the party with less monetary leverage using their cash flow to support another business's sort of investing arm is probably not the most equitable thing in the world. And so, yeah, if you can get your payment terms, and there are drives obviously within the industry, public sector contracts, that that's something that's quite big, is fair payment terms. But yeah, having sort of no more than 30 days really is a good place to start as well. So you're not stretching subbies out, because if they get stretched out across one, two, three, or four more, contracts, and suddenly they can find themselves in a place where you're actually harming yourself. Cash negative, you could send them bust, and then what happens when you send a subby bust as a main contractor? Suddenly you've got a program problem. So it's probably not in your best interest either.
Brilliant. And the final?
And then last of all, the one that I always try and have feature in any contracts that I'm negotiating is limitation of liability. Because if you do not have specific limitation of liability within a contract, if it's not specifically mentioned and what it specifically relates to, then by virtue of that, you have unlimited liability. So silence is unlimited liability. And so I think, if you can get to a stage where something standard, say, 10% of the contract value is the maximum liability in the way of penalties that the receiving party of that contract can swallow, then you're actually in a place where they're like, if it all goes a bit horribly wrong, we're already at a place where they've conceded on some level. So, you feel like you're working for a party that's got a heart, so you're probably going to give them your heart and soul in terms of carrying out the job. But equally, at the same time, you've got some peace of mind to know that I'm going to trade through this, as it were. And so I think limitation of liability is probably a good principle to have as well. And like I said, that list isn't exhaustive. But if I was shooting from the hip to give you a bit of a list, those are the ones that came out of the bingo machine, as it were, and I think probably are good things to feature in any contract.